Hello there, welcome to PMP Exam Fastfacts. We got a question from our friend Shri today about the cost management knowledge area. So let's take a look at Shri's question. It states, hi Phil, where are project funding requirements and output of determined budget process captured? So she's got a series of questions. And the first one is, where are project funding requirements captured? She goes further to say, project funding requirements, management reserves, and total project budget, where are they documented? In the cost baseline as a document? So first of all, let's go to page 89 and establish what Shri is saying. If you go to page 89, you do not find anything under the letter F, meaning project funding requirements are not here. So that means we need to go to the mothership, the PMBOK guide, and unravel what exactly these project funding requirements are. So project funding requirements, if you haven't read it, are pretty much the funding requirements for the project in total, but not just that, also periodically. So that should give you some inkling into the fact that these are implicitly captured in the cost baseline, but they may not be captured in the cost baseline on every single project. So the PMI has decided to go a step further to call out the fact that the funding requirements need to be explained clearly to the powers that be, to the sponsor. Because if you told the sponsor our project is a $5 million project, that's how much we need, they wouldn't know how to split up the monies across the 5 years or 3 years or whatever the time period is. So it's important that we clarify when the monies are needed. That's all. And as a good project manager, this should be implicitly captured in the cost baseline. So if you use a program like Excel or Microsoft Project or Primavera, what have you, and you use that for costing, these amounts should be very clearly specified. And they should tie back to the WBS components that they belong to. In other words, they should tie back to a control account. And that's how it's done. It may not be a separate document. It might just be implicitly captured as part of the cost baseline. So let's go to 7.4, or 7.3, I beg your pardon, and take a look at that output. So this is on page 256, and it states total funding requirements and periodic funding requirements, for example, quarterly, annually, watch this, are derived from the cost baseline. The cost baseline will include projected expenditures plus anticipated liabilities. Funding often occurs in incremental amounts and may not be evenly distributed, which appears as steps in figure 7-9. So going to page 255, 7-9, you can see the expenditure curve there, you can see the cost baseline, and you can see the project funding requirements, just showing the periodic requirements for those funds. It says the total funds required are those included in the cost baseline plus management reserves, if any. Funding requirements may include the sources of the funding. So when it comes down to the management reserves, bear in mind that management reserves are not clear immediately. In fact, you do not know the enormity to which the management reserves will be used. And that's why they are not part of the cost baseline. They are not the basis for measuring cost performance. But in the passage of time, as these management reserves are used, it then becomes clearer what the amount is. And that amount is factored in to the running total of the cost baseline, if you will. But at this point, those management reserves are not used. So let's go back to reserve analysis and read this. This should be under data analysis. And this is on page 252. So a quick read here. It says, a data analysis technique that can be used in the determined budget process includes, but is not limited to, reserve analysis, which can establish management reserves for the project. Management reserves are an amount of the project budget withheld for management control purposes and are reserved for unforeseen work. So if you don't end up doing unforeseen work, those management reserves are not used. That's the bottom line. It says management reserves are intended to address the unknown unknowns that can affect a project. The management reserves is not included in the cost baseline. See that? They ain't included in the cost baseline, but is part of the overall project budget and funding requirements. When an amount of management reserves is used for unforeseen work, the amount of management reserve used is what? Added to the cost baseline, thus requiring an approved change to the cost baseline. So the bottom line is this: if you are not using management reserves, you're not part of the cost baseline. If you are not yet using management reserves, even though they are calculated in the background as part of the overall budget for the project, you will not find these amounts implicitly in the cost baseline just yet. But as the project proceeds and as unknown unknowns emerge, your cost performance baseline will be updated with these amounts. But I wouldn't split hairs on the PMP exam for this. You know, this could be very hard to explain to someone who has not experienced it. So while the PMI try to keep some stuff away from controversy, it gets into controversy like this. But it's all good. Let's read the end of Shree's message here. And Shree goes further to say, and project funding requirements is simply a funding requirement for each time period along the project time axis. And all of them are not project documents. Yes, they're not project documents. They are not included as a specific piece called project documents, but you can extrapolate. You can extrapolate the project funding requirements from the cost baseline. Wherever you are in the project, at the beginning, you can extract it. In the middle, when unknown unknowns happen, then that amount becomes different and it's updated, as it says on page 252. Yeah. So Shree, I hope that helps you. Don't overthink it. Just remember, project funding requirements are not explicit documents, but they are implicitly extracted from the cost baseline. And when your project hasn't started, you're not overtly concerned with the management reserve because nothing's happened. There have been no unknown unknowns. So you don't really need that money, even though it is there if there's a rainy day, but it's not a hard and fast requirement for the immediate work that has been identified. I hope this helps you. I really hope it does. If you got any further questions, let me know. Great question, Shree. Thank you very much. Keep on chugging and let's get this done. Okay? Bye for now.